So, welcome to this class on neuroscience of human movement. This is part 3 of our discussion on action potentials. So, in today's class we will be discussing the relationship of the resting membrane potential with the threshold of action potential. If that is varied artificially due to some condition, what could happen to the system, and more specifically we will discuss the case of hyperkalemia. So, we saw earlier that if the threshold is here, say for example, the closer to the threshold you take the membrane potential, say for example here, then I add one more stimulus here so that the threshold is reached, then that will cause an action potential, is it not? This is something that we have seen. However, one more thing to be noted is the resting membrane potential is approximately here, say for example, that is the resting membrane potential and that is the threshold. Suppose I am maintaining the resting membrane potential or the membrane potential farther away from the resting membrane potential, but very close to the threshold, something like that. You would think that it is easier to cause an action potential, but you would, because you would only need a stimulus of that amplitude and not that amplitude, did not. You would not need a larger stimulus to cause an action potential. A relatively small stimulus is sufficient, did not. You would think that that is an advantage. Unfortunately, if the membrane potential is held at a value close to the threshold for a relatively long period, something happens that is non-intuitive. Important to note is that this is biology, and here several exceptions exist for every rule that we speak about, which is why we say in biology exception is the rule. So, let us consider what happens in the case of the situation when the membrane potential is held at a value very close to the threshold. What happens in that state? We saw the case of the voltage gated sodium channel. It will open when the threshold is reached, right. So, there is only a very small amount, very small amplitude that needs to be crossed if you already maintain the membrane potential close to threshold, right. So, once again, that is threshold and this is the resting membrane potential, and for whatever reason, we will see the reason later, for whatever reason the membrane potential is held very close to this value. If that happens, you would need only a small amplitude stimulus to take the membrane to threshold, and then an action potential will be caused. Once threshold is caused, the voltage gated sodium channel will get activated, and basically the activation gate will open and a lot of sodium will enter inside. But if you maintain the membrane potential way above the resting membrane potential and close to the threshold, what happens is some form of accommodation happens, some form of response, long term response happens that takes the membrane or that takes the voltage gated sodium channel to a permanently inactivated state. Now, let us remember what this could happen. Let us discuss what this could cause. What this could cause is no more action potentials can be produced. Let us remember that if the activation gate is closed and the inactivation gate is open, regardless of which period I am, regardless of the membrane potential, even if I am in relative refractive period, a larger stimulus can take the membrane to threshold and cause one more action potential. This is what we saw in the previous class. But if the inactivation gate is closed, regardless of what the strength of the stimulus is, I cannot take the membrane to threshold and cause one more action potential, because the membrane is in its absolute refractory period, right. That absolute refractory period is the period during which the voltage gated sodium channel is inactivated. So, maintaining the membrane potential close to threshold causes permanent deactivation. So, permanent deactivation of the voltage gated sodium channel causes a situation where it is impossible to cause one more action potential. So, this is what happens in the case of hyperkalemia. So, I am maintaining it at this level, say for example, and this even after that, even after producing a stimulus will not cause an action potential. I will continue to maintain at this value. You will never be able to cause an action potential, because the membrane or that part of the membrane is in a situation similar to absolute refractory period, right. This is what happens in hyperkalemia. In general, what is hyperkalemia? What does this do? Once again, in the general case, in the regular case, what happens is, so this is the resting membrane potential. At resting membrane potential, there is, suppose there is a stimulus, and this is what happens. So, this is a healthy muscle, and then basically this causes action potential in skeletal muscles, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, etc. So, relatively healthy function, normal function. Now, suppose the membrane potential is taken upward, say for example here. Now, this can also cause, say, an action potential. You keep taking it upward like that. After some time, what happens is there is permanent deactivation of the voltage gated sodium channel, that no more action potential can be caused. Because of this reason, the muscles will become flaccid. You will not be able to produce force with the muscle. So, that causes several problems, including intestinal cramping and weakness of muscles and so many other such situations. So, basically in the skeletal muscle, it causes weakness and flaccid paralysis, or it starts with the lower extremities, so, or a form of ascending paralysis. So, it starts with the lower extremities and then raises up, right, ascending paralysis, and then moves upwards. And in the cardiac muscle, which is a special type of muscle, it could cause arrhythmia, can even cause cardiac arrest. And in the smooth muscles of the gastrointestinal system, it could cause intestinal cramping. So, essentially this is caused due to closure of the inactivation gate of the voltage gated sodium channel due to accommodation, and this causes weakness and paralysis. So, a higher amount of potassium in the extracellular matrix causes this situation, so it is called as hyperkalemia. So, very special case. Okay. So, with this we come to the end of this lecture. We will discuss other topics in future classes. Thank you very much.